Good morning. It's like our attendance today is 84. Last Sunday we had 83, and a year ago today we had community service down here at the community building. So that is the reason we did not meet here. We do have a few visitors with us this morning. We welcome you here and invite you back. We are always glad that you are here. Come back anytime. On the fair deal, that is next weekend. There will be no services here next week. We will meet down at the community building. I think the services start at 10 o'clock. So don't forget that. Here at the church, we sent out one card this morning. That was a card to Roger Frazier. It was a thinking of you card. I think Roger has been diagnosed with cancer. And so we sent him a card this morning. I have two announcements up here this morning. This announcement comes from Rita Riley. And it says the annual Life Chain is October 1st from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. at Kirksville along Baltimore Street. Signs will be available at the north end of the Lincoln Square Shopping Center before 2:30. This is a quiet, peaceful, prayerful statement to life from conception to natural death. Everyone is welcome, and anyone who can stand for an hour can bring a lawn chair. Thanks. I don't know how many of you have participated in that or how many have seen it in action, but I have drove up Baltimore Street whenever there's going on and the streets are lined with people. So it is a very good deal. It gets the message out there. Okay, I've got another announcement. It says, have you heard the news? There's a baby boy on the way. It says, please join us for a baby shower honoring Morgan Hepler. So this will be Saturday the 28th, October at 2 p.m. at the Crossing Church at 810 East Shepherd Avenue. So that would be, 2 weekends, right? Yeah. That's in October. That's right. Yeah. Sorry about that, but it is in October, the 28th. So it'll be a little while yet. Seems like I've got something else. Okay, do we have any more announcements this morning? Cody's got one.
As Dad mentioned, the fair is next weekend. With that being said, I didn't call and ask for desserts for the meals this year. Nobody did, but if you could bring a dessert for the meals, that would be great for Friday, Saturday, or the Sunday after service. So the meat will be provided, but desserts, anybody that wants to bring a dessert would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, after Sunday services, Mike's got an announcement back there. After Sunday services, there will be a carry-in and dinner. It's kind of a potluck dinner. Everybody bring whatever they want to bring. There's always plenty of food and good fellowship after the services on Sunday. Go ahead, Mike.
Just to let everyone know that this Thursday evening, we will not have our normal Bible study at the feed store because of the fair.
Okay, the youth group meets at the church at Milan. That is between 5 and 7 p.m. tonight. So that is at the Milan Church. So don't forget that. Yeah, okay, is there anything else? We got one up here with Mary.
I just want to welcome my brother and his wife, Carol, from Payson, Arizona, here worshiping with us here this morning.
Yep.
Phil and Carol.
Okay, Melba.
The cards we have sent around, sometimes we fail getting them all the way around. So they usually go up the north side and then back in that room. So if they're back in that room and you see they haven't been this side, please see if they get all the way around.
Okay, here at the church we're sending a lot of cards out, and you hear a lot of feedback where the people really are glad that we sent cards. So it is a good deal to send cards and get everybody's names wrote down. Do we have any more announcements this morning? If there's nothing further, I'll turn the services. One more thing. Did anyone have a birthday or an anniversary? I knew there was one birthday. Yours is today. Well, happy birthday. Looks like she's doing well. Anyone else? Okay, I will turn the service over to Mike. What?
How many of you have noticed that every time I get up to preach, at least somebody cries? Wow. So good to have all the little ones in our congregation, isn't it? But aren't they a blessing? And some on the way, and one just here. What a blessing. A little boy went to his grandfather and asked him to imitate a frog. Who gave you the idea that I could mimic a frog, Grandpa asked, and he said, Mom said you could. The boy responded, I heard her tell Dad that we'll all be rich when you croak. So if Noah had not saved the animals from the flood, our vocabulary would be much different today, wouldn't it? Think of the expressions that we use every day that would be meaningless. For example, croak like a frog was one. Quiet as a mouse. Have you ever heard that one? Slow as a turtle. Mean as a junkyard dog. Floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee. These are all things that we have gotten from the fact that we have all these beautiful animals in our creation that God's given us. And we find phrases inspired by animals even in the Scripture. For example, the Bible commands us to be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. That's found in Matthew 10, verse 16. And Jesus called Herod a fox. It's not like when we call a lady a fox. But Jesus was saying that you are shrewd as a fox and you are untrustworthy. And Peter compared the devil to a roaring lion in 1 Peter 5:8. And while animals may enhance our vocabulary, they do not have vocabularies of their own, at least none that we can understand. But one of the most strangest stories in the whole Bible that we're going to take a look at today occurred in Numbers, the 22nd chapter, where an animal does speak. And on this particular occasion, God uses a donkey to speak to a wayward prophet named Balaam. And the lessons God taught through a donkey apply not only to Balaam, but also to us today. So let's turn in our Bibles, if you would like to follow along, to Numbers, the 22nd chapter. And I'm going to begin reading in verse number 1. It says, Then the Israelites traveled to the plains of Moab and camped along the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that the Israelites had done to the Amorites. And Moab was terrified because they were so many people. Indeed, Moab was filled with dread because of the Israelites. Now, before we go too much further, there's two names that sound a lot alike. One is Balak, B-A-L-A-K, and that is the king of Moab. And the other one is we guess he's a prophet. His name is Balaam. It's spelled differently, so they're two different people. So the Moabites said to the elders of Midian, This horde is going to lick up everything around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, he sent messengers to summon Balaam, the son of Beor, who was at Petor, near the river in his native land. And Balak said, A people has come up out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. Now come and put a curse on these people, because they're too powerful for me, and perhaps then I will be able to defeat them and drive them out of the country. For I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed. Verse 7, the Bible says, The elders of Moab and Midian left, taking with them the fee for divination. When they came to Balaam, they told him what Balak had said. Now, this man Balaam is a difficult man to figure out in Scripture. The Bible usually provides a very clear idea, a picture of one's character. And when we read the Bible stories, the reader of the Bible can almost always determine if this is a good guy or a bad guy. With Balaam, there's not a whole lot known about him. It's really an interesting thing. He's almost nothing is known, and it makes him one of the most mysterious characters in the whole Bible. And Balaam is mentioned, by the way, in the Bible more than the mother of Mary. He's mentioned more times. For example, here in Numbers 22, for example, but also he's mentioned in 2 Peter 2 and verse 15, where Peter's talking about false teachers, and he says, do not be like Balaam. And also we find in Jude 1 and verse 11 that it's also talking about those religious leaders that are hungry for money, and uses his name again. And then in Revelation 2 and verse 14, one of the letters to the 7 churches there in Asia talks about do not be like Balaam, who went after money again, and it was a false teacher as well. But the Bible does not reveal whether Balaam was a prophet of Jehovah or if he was a pagan prophet. Was he God's spokesman, or was he just a religious racketeer? Well, we do know that he was a Midianite who had a wide reputation of being somewhat of a seer. And that prompted Balak to summon Balaam's assistance. And so what had happened here is that God's people, about 2 million of them, had come across and were defeating the people of the land, and God was giving them his promise, the land that flows with milk and honey. And the Amalekites had just been thrashed and just been destroyed. And so Balak was watching this, and he says, oh my goodness, I'm in big, big trouble. And so he says, let's call for this prophet who will curse people if we pay him enough money, or bless people if we pay him enough money. And, you know, in our day and age, we have discovered, or many people have, that religion is a good business. And if I tell you what you want to hear, then I can get a lot of people sending money, is what they've understood and what they found out. But if we turn to the Word of God and teach people the truth of the Word of God, oftentimes it's not so much that way. In fact, the Bible tells us in the last days there will be people who are itching ears, looking for somebody that will tell them what they want to hear. So they go to one church and they don't like that preacher. They go to another church, not for me, and they finally find one that makes me feel so good. I don't have to change a thing in my life, and everybody's going to heaven, and I'm going to. Well, when a military leader like Balak faces the unknown, he almost always turns to the supernatural before the battle. I don't know how many of you saw the movie Patton, and in this particular movie, there's one scene where, of course, Patton is kind of shown to be sort of a perverse man with bad language. But in this particular scene, it shows Patton on his knees with the chaplain of the army asking for God to be with them in a certain battle. And of course, all of you remember when President Bush invited Billy Graham into the White House before the first Gulf War, and they together prayed to God that he would be with them in battle. We've always wanted to know what's going to happen in a case like this, and military leaders look to and acknowledge God in their time of need many times. So King Balak wanted Balaam to come to his house and pronounce a curse on Israel. But there's 2 words, again, that kind of describe who Balaam really was. The first one is the word divination. It says, through divination and with big fee. Divination means to consult with spirits of the underworld. And what are we talking about when we say spirits of the underworld? Are we talking about God and his angels? We're talking about probably demons and the organized forces of Satan. You know, and so we have that still today, don't we? And so through astrology, sometimes they They would do it through palm reading. Any of you ever had your palm read? I told a story first service about one time when my parents lived in Boston. I was not born yet. And they were walking down the street there in Boston. They walked by this shop that said palm reading. The lady was sitting out in a chair, and his mom and dad walked by. She said, you know, for so much money, I'll tell you if it's a boy or a girl. And Mom didn't even know she was pregnant with me yet. You know, I was a boy. And so that's, you know, that's one of those things. That was divination, I suppose. And so, you know, reading tea leaves or the entrails of an animal, all these things, is something that he probably did. And the second word that describes who this man really was the word fee. It said, for they must have expected Balaam to charge for his services, because it says when the people came, they brought a big fee. Well, verse 7, the elders of Moab and Midian left, and they told Balak what he had said. And they said, well, spend the night here, Balaam said to them, and I will bring you back the answer that the Lord gives me. The Lord gives me. So the Moabite princes stayed with him, and God came to Balaam and asked, who are these men with you? God came to him and said, and Balaam said to God, Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message, a people that has come out of Egypt, covers the face of the land, and now come and put a curse on them for me. Perhaps then I will be able to fight them and drive them away. So he's telling God this when God came to him. But God said to Balaam, do not go with them. You must not put a curse on these people, because they are blessed. They were his people, right? And he had promised them the land that he was giving them. The next morning, Balaam got up and said to Balak's princes, go back to your own country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. You know, I'm thinking that probably Balaam was a person who pretended that he was going to hear from God. And he might have claimed that he represented many gods, depending on who his audience might be. But can you imagine what he must have felt like when God actually showed up? He didn't expect that. He did not expect that. And you know what that reminds me of? A man who was trying to become an actor. And so he was wanting to get his foot in the door in his acting career, and got a phone call from his talent agent and said, there's an opportunity for you. There's this play that's going on, and one of the actors has gotten sick, and they need somebody real quick, and all you have is one line. All you have to know is the one line, and that line is, hark, I hear the cannons roar. Can you do that? He said, oh, yes, I can. Can you do it right away? Yes, I'll be right there. So on the way, he's practicing this line, and he thought, you know, how shall I do this so it really sounds good? I could say, hark, the cannons roar, or I could say, hark, the cannons roar, or I could say, hark, the cannons roar. And he was practicing, thinking which is going to sound best. So he got there, and they hustled him into the dressing room. They put his little outfit on him, and they pushed him out. And about that time, two big old cannons went boom, boom. And he goes, what is that? And I think to myself that probably that's what Balaam thought when God appeared. Who are you? What is that? But God was there, and you know, that's what and let's go on and read verse 13. And after he refused to go, in verse 14. So the Moabite princesses returned to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us. Then Balak sent other princes, more numerous and more distinguished than the first. He had more people. They were higher ranking than the first. They came to Balaam and said, this is what Balak, the son of Zippor, says, do not let anything keep you from coming to me, because I will reward you handsomely and do whatever you say. Come and put a curse on these people for me. So this king was being very, very He was worried. What am I going to do? It kind of reminds me of the preacher that he got a phone call from another church, and they said to him, we would love for you to come and be our minister, and we will double your salary. So he said to his wife, he said, you know what, honey, I think we have something we need to pray about. And he told her about the church in the phone call. And so he said, I'm going to go downstairs to my study and pray, and you go upstairs and start packing. Sometimes we want to hear what we want to hear. And so let's go ahead and look at the rest of this story. Verse 18. But Balaam answered them, even if Balak gave me his palace filled with silver and gold, I could not do anything great or small to go beyond the command of the Lord my God. Now stay here tonight, as the others did, and I will find out what else the Lord will tell me. That's interesting, isn't it? I will not go with you, no matter what you say or how much money you give me. But stay here tonight, and I will see what else the Lord might have to say to me. Man alive, he couldn't stand all that money is going to go away from him. Maybe God has a second opinion. Do you think God has second opinions once he's told us what he wants us to do in his word? We try to make it second opinions. We go to doctors, and you'll say, I want a second opinion. One doctor told me this, and I want to see what you think. We don't do that with God. And so that night, God came to Balaam, and he said, since these men have come to summon you, go with them, but do only what I tell you. God was not happy. So Balaam got up in the morning, he saddled his donkey, and he went with the princes of Moab, but God was very angry when he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. And when the donkey saw the angel, which was probably the death angel of the Lord, standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the road into a field, and Balaam beat her to get her back on the road. That was the example of the first GPS that sent somebody into a cornfield. And so he beat her, get back on the road. Well, then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between 2 vineyards with walls on both sides. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed close to the wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it, so he beat her again. Going into the field is one thing, but man, that hurt. You crushed my foot. Then the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn either to the right or the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she laid down under Balaam, and he was angry, and he beat her with his staff. I saw a cartoon one time that showed a man standing at the judgment seat of Christ. It was a cartoon. And it looks like Peter standing there, and he opens a book, and he said to the farmer, he said, you know what? You almost made it until you started raising cattle. You almost made it. I heard of a Quaker who had a rebellious cow. And this cow was one of those cows that when he milked her, she step in the pail and kick it over and all those things. And after he had endured all he could, he said to the cow, thou knowest that I am a Quaker and a pacifist and cannot strike thee, but thou dost not know, that is, that tomorrow I am going to sell thee to a Baptist. Well, and here's the rest of the story. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? And Balaam answered the donkey, you have made a fool of me. Yeah, if I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now. The donkey said to Balaam in return, am I not your own donkey, which you have always had and ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you? No, he said. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his drawn sword. So he bowed and fell face forward. And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these three times? I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away, I would have certainly have killed you by now. But I have spared her." And Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned. I did not realize that you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now, if you're displeased, I will go back." See that Balaam the prophet appears to have repented. You know, we do not think it's strange when a toy manufacturer makes a talking doll or a talking teddy bear, do we? I'll have to say, though, the first time I ever saw a Chatty Cathy, it kind of freaked me out. You know, I have a granddaughter that has probably 200 talking Elmos. I'm serious. She's special needs, and sometimes when you're at her house, if they go off at night, it's not funny. It really isn't. Or a talking teddy bear. Did you know that we had, I don't remember which one of our granddaughters, got a teddy bear that mama can speak into it, it records it, and they can play it back and here's mama's voice. It's kind of neat. I got to playing with it, and well, we won't go into that. We do not ask questions when television producers use special effects like creating a talking horse like Mr. Ed. You remember that? Is it unreasonable to think that God, the producer of this universe, could speak through a donkey that he had created? And if God could speak to Moses through a burning bush, he can surely speak and choose to speak to an apostate false prophet who's going against his word. You know, is it harder for God to cause a donkey to talk, or was it harder for him to walk on water? Was it harder for him to raise the dead? Or like it's recorded in Luke 1 and verse 37, where it says nothing is impossible with the Lord. But I personally think that the strangest part of this miracle is that Balaam did not seem shocked by this. He carried on a dialogue with the donkey as if it was normal. How many times have you've ridden me before? Yeah, you know, he's talking to the donkey. He really is. I want to look at 2 things real quickly this morning that I get out of this passage. The first one is this: the spiritually discerning see the unseen. The spiritually discerning see the unseen. This donkey saw something that the prophet could not see. And I think we as Christians sometimes need to have our eyes open to see what's really going on in this world and in our lives that we can't see normally. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 18, it says, great apostle Paul says, "For we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Well, if you were to look around this room today, what would you see? Let's just do it. I see pictures on the wall. I see pulpit there. I see TV screens. I see carpet and pews and lights and fans. And I'm looking at the clock. Don't worry about that. I see a piano. This is all the physical world, right? But if you also look around and see the people who are sitting here, you know, you see different people. What are you seeing? You're seeing the spiritual world. And why is that? Do you know that one of these days this church building will not be here? But those of you who are here today have what we call a eternal spirit living within you that is going to live forever and ever throughout eternity, hopefully in heaven. Hopefully in heaven. And I think that we as Christian people need to be more in tune with what is real. And let's not get so bent out of shape about the temporary things, and realize we have visitors come to our church and we have new people attend. We need to look at those people and love those people and realize that these people are more important than anything else. And when you look at me, I'm sorry that you have to. But you say, well, who's standing here? What would your answer be? Your answer would be Mike. But you don't really see me. This is just the body that God has given me. And when I look at you, I see the body he has given you as well, that we use in this world to house us, the real us. And that's hard for us sometimes to realize that, well, let's just use an illustration. Let's say, for example, that I got in a situation where I needed to have my arm amputated. Well, part of my body's gone, but am I still Mike? What if I have my legs cut off? Am I still Mike? And I could keep going on to everything. But if the real Mike, the real Cody, I always like to pick on Cody, I don't know why. The real Mary, Larry, whoever I called on, you live inside of this. And with young people, I explain it like this. If you go to Walmart and you park your brand new car that you don't want somebody to door ding, way out there, and you walking into the Walmart and you turn around and you go beep beep, make sure it's locked. That car is not you. You're walking into Walmart. I'm just using that as a simple illustration. Same way with our body. Our body stays in the grave here until the resurrection, but the real you go somewhere new. And so let's realize that we live in two distinct worlds, the physical and the spiritual, and be much aware of the fact that the spiritual is very important. The second thing is the spiritually discerning speak sometimes the unexpected. He didn't expect this donkey to tell him what he did. Years ago in Council Bluffs, we had a sign out front of our church that got some graffiti on it. Somebody had vandalized our sign. So first thing Sunday morning, we came and there's some naughty words and stuff on this sign, and we call the police. The policeman that came, he took our report and so on. It was myself, and I remember one other guy. His name was Bob Meyer. We were there, and so he took the report. And so Bob, he said to the policeman, he says, "You know what? This is the times of our service. We'd love to have you come to our church." Well, time went by, didn't see the policeman, and finally one day he did come. And over a period of time, he gave his life to Christ, was baptized into Christ, and became a member of the church. And he and I became very good friends. And I used to ride with him in his police car sometimes, in the front seat. And I remember one time we were in conversation, he said to me, he said, "Mike," he said, "after I came and took that report on your sign," he said, "that little guy, what's his name?" His name's Bob. He said, "everywhere I went, I saw him." He said, "I'd be in the grocery store," and I said, "Oh, no, there he is." And I'd go down the other aisle, and he would find me. He'd say, "I haven't seen you at church yet." And he said, and then I'd go somewhere else, and there he was. And he said, finally, I said, "Oh, I'm going to go." And when he came, he came to Christ, and which was a wonderful thing. I'm going to read you something I ran across in closing. It says this. It's a guy by the name of Bob Moorhead, who is a minister of the Overlake Christian Church in Seattle, tells of a new, enthusiastic Christian named Mark. And Mark was not very impressive. He's not an impressive witness. Mark had only about a third-grade education, and he was not a very polished person. But he insisted on enrolling in the evangelism training class that the church was offering, hoping to become a regular caller. And the minister, Bob, admitted that he hoped Mark would not pass. He didn't want really yell, but he did. And on about Mark's third night of calling, the secretary made a mistake, and Mark was sent to call on an attorney and his wife who had been attending the church. And so they gave all these people little cue cards to know what they were going up against and who the people were. And Mark's prep card read, "Bill and Jean have been called on twice, but continue to reject Jesus Christ." And Bob learned later what happened in that call. Mark entered their home. He skipped the polite small talk. He went straight to the point. And he said, "The card says you continue to reject Jesus Christ. I want to know if you're going to reject Jesus again tonight, because if you do, you're going to go to hell. Yeah. The husband cleared his throat and glanced at his wife and said, well, we've never had anyone put it quite that bluntly before. And Mark said, you do believe in Jesus, don't you? Oh, the man said, yes, but don't say but, Mark said. People go to hell that way. Is there any reason why you and your wife cannot accept Jesus Christ? So the man looked at his wife and said, well, Jean, well, what do you think? And she said, I think it's time. Mark later took them to the church after he prayed with them that night. Then he took them to the church building, saw to it that they were baptized. And then he walked into the secretary's office and said, who's next? And I got to thinking about that, and I'm thinking, wow. A donkey told the prophet things, and here's a donkey. He's a donkey, all right? And had probably never spoken before, and gave the prophet the message that he needed to hear. You know, in closing, I want to say this. It's so easy to worry about saying the right thing and having the right timing and showing tact, that one ends up saying nothing at all sometimes because of that. Technique is not nearly as important as conviction. And if God spoke through a donkey, he can speak through us. If we will see what is unseen and stand for what sometimes is unpopular, and sometimes speak what is unexpected, because God is amazing and powerful. And we're going to sing a song today, number 378 in our songbooks. And you know, maybe you can relate to that story. And maybe you're looking at your spouse or looking at yourself and saying, you know what? Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to do what you've always known you should do and come to Christ and to serve him. But we're going to sing 378 together. And if you feel that way, this is a good time to make that happen. Let's stand together. Verse, 378. All to Jesus